at our agenda anyway. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our regular board meeting for Wednesday, June the 14th, 2023. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize this meeting is taking place on the traditional unceded territories of the Quetzin people, and I know we're all grateful to be here. I do want to make a brief comment on our land acknowledgement and territorial acknowledgements. In consultation with nations in the region, it's been brought to our attention that we should more accurately and respectfully do our territorial acknowledgement. So we will be working with staff on that and the nations that we work, live, and play in throughout the region to make sure that we're showing that appropriate level of consideration and respect. But for today, I just wanted to appropriately recognize that we are here on the traditional unceded territories of the Quetzin people, that I'm so grateful to be here. I know we all are, and so grateful for the working relationship that we continue to develop together. So with that, we will move on to the approval of the agenda, but wait, there's more. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have some amendments to your agenda today. Quite a few, actually. CR 4-10-2 has an incorrect file number noted in the recommendation and should reference RZ23G01. We also have an addition of the Committee of the Whole same-day recommendation. In our closed meeting today, we have an addition of the referral of CSR2 and a same-day recommendation.
Thank you. And because I will forget, I'll ask Ms. Ferguson to alert us when we come to those points. Thank you. So with those changes to the agenda, if I can get a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Toporowski. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. I believe we're on to adoption of minutes. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Adoption of the minutes for the regular board meeting of May 10th.
If there are no errors or omissions, that's been moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Deck. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Director Manhas, because I may forget you, make sure you put up the little virtual hand, because then you'll pop into the corner and displace me on my screen and I'll see you. Because I look around the room and I do forget to sometimes look at my screen. Moving on, Ms. Ferguson.
The adoption of the special board meeting minutes of May 10th, 2023.
Moved by Director Toporowski, seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have no business arising from the minutes. Next is the public input period, and we have three in the gallery, pardon me. Anybody want to?
Welcome forward for public input. You have up to 3 minutes per speaker, and just make sure you turn on the microphone. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Joyce Benson, Drinkwater Road, Cowichan Valley. And my concern and questions today relate to this front page article on June the 8th in the Citizen referring to a $3 million restoration announced for Cowichan River.
Sorry, ma'am.
I have questions.
These are for items on the agenda today. Do you have any statements on items on today's agenda?
This is on the public agenda because I believe they
I
referred to
appreciate
public
that, Ms.
consultation.
Benson, but it's
and
not.
there's been no public consultation. So when was my opportunity?
Your opportunity would be either you could send a letter to the board,
No.
or you could reach out to myself, the chair, or legislative services, but this is for items on today's agenda, so your comments are out of order.
Well, they're saying it'll start in the summer.
Thank you.
That's now.
Thank you, Ms. Benson.
There was no public consultation.
You can, if you want to make a meaningful statement to the board, an email would be encouraged, but that's not appropriate for question period as per our policy.
Oh, I thought this was public input.
This is public input on items on the agenda as per the policy.
Not question period.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
is there anyone who would like to give us input on items on today's agenda?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and fellow directors. I would like to speak to CR 6, 14, 1 and 2. And in regards to the new boat launch, it's very much understood that this is an urgent need. But I'm concerned, after reading the report and reviewing the ESC meeting, that this might be a case of putting the cart before the horse. It's my understanding that the park in question is owned by BC Parks, and it would also require cooperation with MOTI. And also, we talk about respect for the First Nations, and I heard you speak to that today. The Malahat Nation has an interest in exploring shared management opportunities, and the province has a commitment to a collaborative management agreement in a treaty association agreement in principle. And I'm not going to try and say the First Nations name here because I do not wish to disrespect them, but it is within the report. We need to have early consultation, not only with First Nations, but we also need to have that with our folks that provide safety for us, which is our fire department. And I found it quite a difficult situation that Chief Shields was put into a situation where he had to come and speak to the board as a member of the public than an interested person. I think we need to be very cognizant of that and not create another Taylor Park situation by not first addressing parks to see if they would be willing to entertain this and that the proper consultations have been done. Secondly, I would like to speak to BEA2, Bylaw 4483. I've stood up before you many times. Please do not abdicate your rights to represent your constituents. And we know from past history that telecommunication sightings should remain within the public so that the public can be very much aware and part of that process. And I would like to ask a question. I know you won't answer me. Sorry, I got 1 minute.
Yeah.
I want to know the process because I know that there is applications that have been received and development permits have been delegated before this bylaw has been passed. And I just wanted to make you aware of that. Thank you, and I'm Susan Kaufman from
Thanks, Susan.
Satlam.
Mr. Evans?
Oh, Mr. Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, on today's agenda is a report from the EASC meeting from the 7th of June, and I refer to CR 6 14.1. And it is that the Shawnigan Lake schematic design for waterfront parks, landscape, and architectural design brief be adopted, and that the boat launch feasibility, this is number 2, and the boat launch feasibility study, Shawnigan Lake, be received for information. Mr. Chair, had you been at the EASC meeting, you would have seen that in the study, there is a floating boat house with a dance hall or a meeting place on top at the Wharf Park to be built in there. And the fire chief was very, very disturbed about that because the fire chief needs the Wharf Park ramp free for firefighting and for water pumping. So I would like to see, and I'm sure a lot of other people would like to see, that on 14.1, that the adopted be changed to information. Because that if this is adopted, in that schematic are a lot of things to look at. And I think each thing should be looked at individually. And we should pick up the phone and phone Ministry of Environment or whoever's responsible for doing design on streets and that, to see if it can be done before we start making plans. Today I would urge the directors here to please not allow this building to go in there at the Wharf Park for safety reasons. And I know that all the members of the ESC meeting listened to this, and I think they were impressed by the chief's request. It's not only for firefighting, but it's also for evacuating first responders coming off the lake. So please today take adopted out, put in information, and that should be fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. And just so you know, I was here but virtually, so you would have seen my blank screen. So I did see that meeting. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank
I
you
was
very
here
much.
virtually that day.
Bye.
All right, seeing no one else in the gallery for public input, do we have public input from anyone online?
No, we have two for question.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be waiting until the end of our open meeting. And we'll move on. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next is information, and that's we have an information item presentation by Division E RCMP, Re-Island District Stats, and that's for information.
Thank you. So we do have that item for information. Any questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee and Commission reports. CR1, a report and recommendations of the Governance Committee meeting of May 10, 2023. And we have one recommendation.
Thank you. Looking for a motion on the recommendation?
Is this CR1?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Am I reporting
Oh,
to
yeah,
you?
go ahead. Sorry. Director Martman.
So there is a little bit of a complication with this motion, so I just wanted to see if I can get it corrected before I read it out. And that is the policy that's stated in the motion says Code of Conduct for elected officials. However, the attachment is the Code of Conduct for board, committee, and commission members. So I just wanted to, and that.
I would suggest that if you replaced for elected officials, because we had that discussion, that wasn't caught in this recommendation.
Okay, thank
So
you.
if you amended the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the Governance Committee would like to report and recommend that the CVRD adopt the revised iteration of the Code of Conduct for board, committee, and commission members as attached with revisions and definitions clause 1.2.2 bully and harass dash addition of the term shunning and the addition and the definition. Sorry, can't even read my reading. Vexations, removal of, regardless of its merits.
So that's been moved by Director Martman, seconded by Director Nicholson. Any discussion? Director Wilson, and then Douglas, and then Justice.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is going to move forward. It's been approved and all the rest. I do still have a few concerns over some of the terms which are being used in there, such as shunning. I mean, all this is open to interpretation. I shun him all the time. He's not yet complained about me, but there are certain, I've just called him as well. So there are certain aspects of this, and I think Director Morrison hit this the nail on the head, where it's almost we will become, and I can't remember the exact words, but faceless automatons, something like that. And we will, because we have to be so careful with what we say now. I had a situation the other day where my wife's name is Barbara. I have always called her Babs. over here it's Barb. And I was told that Babs was not acceptable. Duh, it's been 52 years. So I do have some very real concerns about some of the terminology in here, and I would hope that directors will use a huge amount of discretion when looking at this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Douglas, and then Justice.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I had a question with regards to one of the sections in the Code of Conduct here. It's section 3.2.6. So it reads, information obtained by any member which is likely to be used in a board or political debate must be provided to all members and to the CAO. And so on the one hand, reading that, I can understand the whole principle of not surprising one another, that we all want to come prepared to these meetings with the same information. However, you know, based on our own experiences and, you know, our own communities, we've all got access to different information. And if I could give you an example, even yesterday, our committee at North Cowichan was meeting discussing our biodiversity protection policy. We had some questions came up about the coastal Douglas fir bioclimatic zone and how much of that had been lost as a result of human activity over the last 150 years. Because of my familiarity with the State of the Environment report here, the CVRD, I was able to pull upon that right away and pull out some statistics to provide some context to the rest of council on what the impact had been to that coastal Douglas fir zone over the last 150 years as a result of different development and industrial activity and agriculture. So I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, in terms of that 3.2.6, if the understanding is that that's kind of no surprises coming into these meetings, I think that makes sense. But if I use my example from yesterday evening, again, we're all going to have access to different information that you know, we may pull upon in debate. So I want to make sure that this policy here doesn't preclude that sort of approach in our discussions at this table or commissions or committees or what have you.
So I will say, in that specific example, that is information available to everyone. I think it's more of like, no surprises. I think that's the best way you could put it. It's in more formal language, but it's just the principle of no surprises, or what I would call like, aha, I pulled this from yesterday's paper, where nobody could be reasonably expected to have that information, and then building arguments after argument based on that, you know, sort of emerging information. But yeah, I think it's based on the principles of no surprises. And to Director Wilson's point as well, I think there's a test of reasonableness that we all have to uphold, right? We all pick on Jesse. No, I'm just kidding. But you know, we have relationships that exist, and there's well, he gives it as good as he takes it. But there's a test of reasonableness, and there's the strength of the body, and we do have within that policy sort of the informal resolution process before sort of formalizing a code of conduct complaint. So I'm reasonably comfortable with it, but the points are well taken. And to your question, yeah, it's about no surprises. Thanks. Director Justice.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking for a bit of clarity pertaining to when and if reports are released to the public or situations are resolved in either open and closed meetings. And I do note that in section 4.1.94, it does say that the board may deliberate on and vote on a report, excuse me, in a closed meeting where there is valid reason to close the meeting under section 90 of the community charter. But I understand that there is some legal disagreement on how that is applied or interpreted in some of these cases. Could somebody fill me in?
I'd have to, go through to staff. My interpretation of that is that, again, it's sort of the body, this is a policy, so the body's enforcement of this policy, essentially based on the roles that we serve, is up to the body, right? Other than, like you say, the legal implications where it might be to protect someone's identity or whatever, but Mr. Padel can.
Correct, I would concur with that interpretation. So essentially, it has to be passed by the board to be distributed publicly. And then moving forward, obviously, you would take legal context into consideration when making those decisions.
If I might just have a brief follow-up. So some of the language in some of the other sections is also, seems to me to be a little ambiguous. For example, in section 4.1.8, I, or 1, it does say on where the commissioners determined that a member did violate this policy after the commissioners delivered a copy of the investigation report to the complainant and the board, on board resolution, which is in line with what you're saying, the CVRD shall make the investigation report available to the public. I guess I'm wondering, shouldn't it say may instead of shall? I mean, I realize that this is a sort of a small thing, but it does sort of imply that there isn't a choice in this, even though it does have on-board resolution. And I will say also in section 4.1.9, it has the same language where it says on-board resolution, comma, it will do so in a public meeting. And I guess I was wondering what takes precedence, but you're suggesting that it would always be the board that decides whether a report is released
Through the chair.
publicly,
Yes, that is correct.
or
So-
whether thing is resolved in an open or closed meeting.
That's correct. So the intent of the language is that board resolution would then dictate whether or not the matter becomes public or not in both of those scenarios.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Justice should have been on that committee. But those are good points, well taken. I don't know if someone wants to amend the resolution to take into account those wording changes or if it's necessary. Director Nicholson.
I would like to, because it kind of bugged me at the time.
Yeah,
I couldn't
so
quite
I
put
think
my
that's
finger as
easy.
articulate on it as
Yeah.
Director Justice did, but.
So I think if we do have this moved and seconded, I believe, yes. So to amend the resolution to include the changes to the word shall and make it may, what point was it, number was it, Director Justice? 4.1.8. So 4.1.8 from shall to may.
And
4.1.93.
4.1.93.
May do so. Okay, so the shall to may and the will to may. Seconder for that amendment? All right, now we're on the amendment. Does anybody want to speak to the amendment before I call the question on said amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? None opposed? Oh, I guess switch back to my Director Manhas screen. No,
Mr.
none.
Chair?
Oh,
Could we just be totally clear on which sections? It was 4.1.8 and
4.1.81. And,
4.9.
yeah, 4.1.93.
I'm wondering if also 4.1.10, because it talks about sanctions that may be imposed. And then when you get down to section 4.1.10K, there is another shall.
Back to the podium.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a shall there.
But it's triggered based on the previous,
Yeah, maybe some clarification on it then.
but, oh, okay. Through to you, sir. See,
Yeah, so from my perspective, the ability to have the decision is made in 4.1.10.I or 1. Sanctions may be imposed for violation. So when we get to K, where it reads, where a member of the board has been found by the Integrity Commissioner or Ad hoc Commissioner to have breached the policy, the remuneration to which the member would be otherwise entitled shall be adjusted in accordance to the following. So once again, that's relaying back to item I or 1, where it is may. So it's at the discretion of the board to dictate whether or not anything through A through K is actually applicable, at which point, if it is deemed to be applicable in K, then that's how it shall be actioned.
back to you, Director Douglas. Are you happy with that explanation and we can move forward with the amendment we have, or would you like to add to the amendment?
I think it's clear enough on my.
Okay. So can I call the question on the amendment? All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Amendment carries. Back to the motion as amended. So with those two adjustments, it would be back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? Director Nicholson.
I'm just wondering, what would be the process if you look at this again and find there's some deficiency? We can bring some things back to have it reconsidered, can we?
Yeah, you could come back and, with the director's report, say, I found this, I would like to amend it in this way, and I would think.
Through the chair. Also, there is I believe if I wrote in here an annual review period as well, at which point that could be a catalyst for bringing any issues forward that are experienced through the course of the term.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion as amended? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? Director Morrison opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to CR2, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CR2 is a report and recommendations from the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 10, 2023.
Through
There are
to-
four
Thank you.
recommendations.
Thank you. Through to Director Morrison.
I think I just moved the recommendation as published.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Director Segal. Any discussion? Oh, sorry, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I still have a problem with the option 3 for a 3.5% increase in the core budget, because the next one says, number 2, to exclude transit services, VIRL, et cetera, and the new regional recreation service. That 3.5% will probably then translate way up to something else there. So I'm not happy about that, and I'd like to hear if anybody else has any thoughts on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I could, sorry, pardon me? I think his comment was accurate from my understanding, that it's core budget 3.5% increase to exclude transit, library, and regional recreation from that mandate. Unless, yeah, staff are nodding, so that is clear. And that's just, we don't control library budgets, so that one's quite obvious, but yeah.
All right, let me go backwards. 3.5%, too much.
Thank you.
How's that?
Yep. Director Acta, would you like to speak on it? Have we got these moved and seconded? Did we want to sever number 4?
There's really no point. Basically, I'm making my...
Your statement.
3.5% is too much, because we know it's not going to be that much. It's going to be...
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to speak to the motion that's on the floor, please raise your hand and you'll get on the speaker's list. Director McClinton.
Can we, sorry, Director Morrison's motion, not, Mike didn't make a motion. right?
No,
Okay.
no,
Yeah,
no.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, the main motion, the recommendations that have been presented to us have been moved and seconded. Calling the question, all those in favor and opposed. Director Wilson and Acton opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chair, I oppose also.
Oh, sorry, and Director Manhas. Thank you. You got to raise your virtual hand, Tech. I can't see you down there. In my screen, you're just in a bad spot. Thanks. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CR3 is a report and recommendations of the Cowichan Community Center Commission, meeting of May 11th, 2023. There are 2 recommendations. However, number 2 is going to be pulled, as the Cowichan Capitals no longer want to manage the concession.
Thank you. Sorry, we were supposed to do that at budget adoption, I believe, but we missed that. So item 2 is not for consideration, so we're just looking at recommendation 1. Moved by Director Douglas, seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor and opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Ferguson.
CR4 is a report and recommendations of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of May 17th, 2023. There are multiple recommendations.
I just want to reflect on that there was the change to item 10.2, I believe it was.
Correct, 10-2.
And just to state it again, the application number was accurately.
RZ23G01.
Okay. And was there any other changes to that recommendation slate? No. Okay, thank you. Oh, Ms. Pressman.
Okay. Item 8.1.
Yep.
the application ALR 23B01 has been canceled, and there's a report from staff later in the agenda.
Okay, so we'll go to the chair of the Electoral Area Services Committee. It looks like 1 through 7 is pretty clean for all directors. Director Nicholson.
I move 1 through 7.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Morrison. Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Back to Director Nicholson. So it was number 8 was been withdrawn, and then the correction, sorry, 8-1. Okay.
So 8, 1, and 2 are both withdrawn because.
Or is it, yes, it's all of number 8, yes.
All of number 8. So
Okay.
I move 9 through 14.
And do we have a seconder for those? Director Abbott, does anyone want any of those pulled? We'll pull that one and then you can add your amendment. So what number is that? Oh, yeah, it's the next package. Yeah, no worries. One square wheel on a car will still get you where you need to go. It's just a bumpy ride. Any other discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Point of order.
Yes,
Yeah.
electoral area directors only. Sorry, I should have reminded everyone. I'm sure some munis threw some hands up just for fun.
For support, for support.
North Cowichan's probably trying to do boundary expansions. I don't know. So that carried. Was there any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Okay, so now we're moving on, I believe, to CR5.
Correct. CR5 is a report and recommendations of the Kerry Park Recreation Commission meeting of June 6, 2023. The recommendation is that a provincial public highway permit agreement be entered into with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to allow for installation and maintenance of a rainbow crosswalk on the Shawnigan Mill Bay Road entrance to the Kerry Park Recreation Center parking lot.
That's been moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Abbott. Any discussion? Director Segal.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm so happy to see this move forward during Pride Month. And a huge shout out to a well-known community member in Mill Bay, Richard Lewin, an ally who started a petition and called staff and talked to the Ministry of Transportation and really advocated strongly for a rainbow crosswalk. And also a huge thank you to staff. This has involved multiple departments talking to each other and figuring out what the best place and best way to do this has been. And, you know, anything that involves Ministry of Transportation isn't easy, so I'm just so grateful to the staff for putting this forward.
He may have a future as a consultant with how to get things done with the Ministry of Transportation. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CR6 is a report and recommendations of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of June 7th, 2023.
Director Nicholson, can you please read those?
I would like to move 1 through 15, but pull 14.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for 1 through 15, pull 14? Is that a seconder, Director Wilson, or?
I would like to speak on one of number 4.
Okay. Seconded by Director Wilson. Any speakers to that other than Director Wilson? Go ahead. What, pardon me, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Number 4, which is a grant and aid from myself to the Cowichan Valley Primary Care Society. I did speak on this at the EASC, but that was because the municipal members weren't here at the time. So this is an interesting development that I've been speaking with, happens to be my own primary care doctor as well. And they will be they will be appearing as a delegation at the next board meeting on the 28th of this month. And you'll hear a lot more about this, but this is, to me, as I say, I don't normally get excited about stuff, but this is pretty exciting stuff, which I think will be, if it goes forward, a great addition, and I would ask that you look at perhaps providing some funding to them as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice little seed planting there, Director Wilson. Any further discussion? So this is on 1 through 15 minus 14. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. And back to number 14. This was,
So your EASC committee recommends that the Shawnigan Lake schematic design for waterfront parks, landscape, and architectural design brief be adopted, and that the board launch feasibility study Shawnigan Lake be received for information. And I believe Director Acton has a third point to add to this.
Director Acton.
Thank you. And number 3 is prior to any further decisions of the proposed floating pavilion at Shawnigan Wharf Park, that further engagement with the Shawnigan Lake community and stakeholders be completed.
So I move those.
Thank you. Seconded by Director McClinton. Any further discussion on number 14 as amended with the additional resolution? Seeing none, all those, Director Wilson.
Yeah, one of the things that came up during the question, during the public input period, I think there was a suggestion that in number 1, the words "be adopted" be changed for information. Was there?
Yeah.
Could I ask if there's any chance on that happening, or shall we just leave it as it is?
I think, well, I can speak to what I heard, and then I'll go to Director Acton. Was primarily the issue was around the pavilion part of that. The design brief and schematics are usually a guiding document. I haven't looked at it closely, but I'll go over to Director Acton if there's more information there.
Yeah, and so how the process has gone, we've already had the Think Shawnigan engagement, and the Parks Commission has worked with this report that's coming forward, funded it, and been part of the design. So then the next phase would be any kind of budgeting. So we've already done consultation, like, so far. There may be more going forward, but it was the floating pavilion. Yes, that's the concern.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Acton.
Thank you. And just generally, I'll speak to the fact that a lot of times, and this happens with every project, sometimes you have timelines and project deliverables that need to be met, but they're always, as the process has moved along, put through that sort of gristmill of common sense and consultation, emergency services, and during public input, Taylor Park was referenced. Yeah, that was obviously didn't work out the best. But the reality is that we had to make a grant application timeline, and we always knew that in that process, those further environmental studies were going to be done. And in the end, clearer heads prevailed, and it was too environmentally sensitive to put parking there. The project didn't move forward. But having said that, I respect that we all want to make sure that our communities are as vibrant, but primarily as safe as possible. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. And back to Director Nicholson.
And this is for electoral area directors only. I'd like to move 16 through 22.
Thank you.
Unless someone wants something pulled.
Oh, Ms. Pressman. No, I'll go to Ms. Pressman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 19, application DVP 22F01 has been withdrawn as well.
Okay, Les, number 19.
Okay.
All right, so do we have a seconder? Seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? This is for electoral area directors only. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Director Nicholson.
You're welcome.
That's a lot of work. Going on, Mrs. Ferguson.
So our added CR7 is a report and recommendations of the Committee of Whole meeting of June 14th, 2023.
Yes, please.
The motion is that it be recommended, that the annual operating agreement with the BC Transit for the period of April 1, 2023 to March 31, 2024 be approved.
Thank you. Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director McGonigal. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? I'm tired, and Director Morrison still has my name in front of him, so I always called him Director Stone. So I apologize for the McGonigal. Late night and early mornings trying to walk my dog for cancer research, not for cancer, to raise money. All right, Ms. Ferguson, please save us from me.
Number 11 is staff reports. SR1 is a report from the Development Services Division, withdrawn application number ALR 23B01 for 4045 Hillbank Road, PID number 009470557. That's for information.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I am not sure what the word is at this point, but I am concerned about this, not about the report, about the contents of the report. And I think I'd like to make a motion that the board write to the ALC and to the Ministry of Environment to encourage them to follow through on enforcement activities related to the slaughter waste dumping that happened on off Hillbank Road. And this application that has been withdrawn, it appears that he's found a loophole, the applicant's found a loophole to deal with this illegally dumped slaughter waste. And it is completely inappropriate to be potentially polluting the Cook Silo watershed and flagrantly disregarding regulations. And it's been going on for too long.
Thank you. And the motion would not include the last part.
Well,
So
go
do I have
ahead.
a seconder for the motion? So it's been seconded by Director Abbott. And so to speak to it, I see Director Martman.
Thank you, and I follow Director Nicholson's concerns here. I do have a question on staff, though, because in the report it talks about off-site compost material, and I'm wondering if staff can elaborate on how is that monitored, because I believe that is something that they would have to receive a license for. If it's on-site compost, they would not.
So if we don't have the appropriate staff in the meeting, oh, hey, there you are. Sorry. Welcome.
Thank you. So the comment we've received from the ALC is that the Ministry of Environment is currently working through that and is responsible for licensing. So we don't know what the status of that is until it's being resolved, but it's in process.
Yep.
Follow-up, and so I think that this it sort of reinforces Director Nicholson's request. I think the second thing in the staff report also talks about aggregate screening and how do we become aware of that as well?
And thank you. The ALC has indicated that this is currently a compliant and enforcement issue and that they will be following up to make sure that it gets resolved.
Thank you.
So just a follow, but my understanding from the report, it's indicating that if there is any aggregate, it would have to be removed from the screening process, that it would have to be removed, and then it would be subject to local government regulation, is that correct?
Yes, so we do have a deposit bylaw that would potentially apply to that, but it depends on the volume and where it is deposited. If it's deposited outside the regional district, then we won't necessarily have a say.
Thank you.
And you can always follow up offline. Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. SR2 is a report from the Human Resources Division, Director Remuneration. This is an EA-only vote. The recommendation is that the board directs staff to reconcile 2022 and 2023 director remuneration deficits using the director remuneration increase amount previously approved within the 2023 budget, and that the board directs staff to provide recommendations to the Governance Committee towards establishing a director compensation strategy.
Are you here to present, clarify, or answer questions?
All three.
Please go ahead.
I wanted to first clarify that I'd like to strike the first recommendation from the report. Please accept my apologies as I erred in the recommendation written as the outcome would result in director remuneration increased funds being directed towards mini director pay, which is inappropriate. So my apologies for that. In reconciliation of that, I would state that the nominal amount of deficit would be paid through budget amendment, so we'll just sort that out. Ideally, though, and the intent of the report simply is to, one, close the circle on this item, and two, just bring to light and attention to the board of the impact of the EA director increases and how it will impact the the pay scheme, if you will, in terms of the separation between the 51 and 49% in the report. Further to that, my recommendation still stands with regards to requesting that the board direct staff to work on a compensation policy or strategy, I should say, for this purpose.
Thank you. And just for clarity, I think some of the local governments have gone through sort of the UBCM prescribed process, working on best practices and engagement around compensation for elected officials, and that is something that's tasked through the terms of reference to the governance committee, so that discussion appropriately belongs there. But this is reconciling that past. Can you just tell us clearly then what the recommendation is for right now?
To direct staff to reconcile the deficit through budget amendment.
And that's it?
That's it.
Okay. That's been moved by Director Morrison and seconded by Director Segal. Any more discussion? Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to address my comments to the second part of it, that the board directs staff to provide recommendations to the government committee towards a compensation strategy.
Point of order, it's not part of the resolution on the floor.
Is it not?
It's not, no, because that's been removed from here. It's already part of the terms of reference for the governance committee. But once we've called the question on this, I'll give you some latitude if you'd like to just address the concern around the governance committee's agenda.
Thank you very much. That would be great.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Director Justice.
This is just a question with reference to the remuneration of alternate directors. Does this have any pertinence to that? And is there a remuneration, there's no remuneration deficit with respect to alternate directors?
No.
No, this covers, the deficit is with regard to directors, municipal directors and electoral area directors only.
Based on the tie to the increase from the QP bargaining unit.
Correct.
Right. So
Yeah.
alternate directors don't have that tied to?
They don't.
They're correct.
So all part of the things that need to be addressed, because chairs, municipal directors, as long as I've been here, have not had any review of their compensation or review. So I don't know, even as long as you've been here, the workload has increased dramatically. So it's something the governance committee needs to look at in detail. But that's not part of this discussion today or the resolution, and I will call anything to the outside of this resolution as out of order, because I just want to get this done, and the rest can be talked about in governance, but we can go on. Director Acton.
Just a question on the resolution. Should it say that the board directs staff to reconcile 2022 and 2023 electoral area director remuneration deficits?
No, because it includes municipal directors because of the QP increases. Because our municipal directors are also tied to that. It's all directors.
So is it only the QP? Like
Yes, the compensation policy as it sits today is only tied to the QP bargaining unit.
this increase that it's mentioning is only the QP?
No, but it's a combination of the prior approved remuneration increase and the impact of, really, the budget amendment, which will be a tiny thing, is because of that combined with the retroactive QP increase because of the contracts.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Essentially 1.74% overall.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
Thank
I
you.
would clap for us, but we've got a long road ahead of us. I can't wait for Governance Committee. Welcome, Director Marmon, to your new chairmanship. Moving along,
Did you say you
Ms.
were gonna give me a
Ferguson.
little bit
Oh, yeah,
of
go ahead,
latitude?
Director Wilson. Your
Very
soapbox
much,
is
yeah.
yours.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Recommended resolution, and this is really advance notice for the government's committee there. And I read this as moving forward, which we need to do. Obviously, the thing's been approved by the board, et cetera, But in this particular case, I sincerely hope that in the future, that this board adheres fairly strictly to the recommendations in the UBCM recommendations in the council and board remuneration guide, with the emphasis on the formation of an independent task force. That's mentioned on in figure 6.1 on page 40, and not to award the present board with an award rather for the next board, and that's also mentioned here. They're two prime recommendations to me, and it's something that I will be bringing up in the governance report.
Thank you. And part of it is also honoring the recommendations from the committee that you strike.
Yeah.
But there will be some work that we need to do around chairs and vice chairs and roles and responsibilities that all play into the compensation discussion. So we will have to set up the policies and procedures piece and then kind of refer that to a group, I believe, but not to prejudge the governance committee's work. All right, please, Ms. Ferguson, move us along.
Mr. Chair, we're on bylaws. B1 is that CVRD bylaw number 4476, Wilmot Road Drainage Service Amendment Boundary Extension PID 005490383, bylaw 2023 be adopted.
Moved by Director Abbott, seconded by Director Stone in the corner there. No, Director Morrison. Our signs are still wrong. Chair Morrison today. All those any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. I thought it was funny. I was going to say things that I could never get away with. Ms. Ferguson, for electoral area directors only.
14 is bylaws for electoral area directors only. BEA 1, that bylaw 4479, South Cowichan zoning amendment bylaw 3265, Telegraph Road 2023 be granted third reading.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director McClinton. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
CVRD bylaw number 4479 be adopted.
Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
BEA 2 is CVRD bylaw number 4483, Development Application Procedures bylaw 2023 be granted first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director McClinton, seconded by Director Segal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
That CVRD bylaw number 4483 be adopted.
Moved by Director McClinton, seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
BEA 3 is CVRD bylaw number 4487, Shell Beach Water System Service Area Establishment bylaw 2023 be granted first, second, and third readings.
Moved by, thought the director from the area would do it, but Director Wilson, seconded by Director Martman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
Finally, CVRD bylaw number 4487 be adopted.
Moved by Director Martman, seconded by Director Segal. All those in favor? Oh, you want to speak to it? Sorry, at adoption.
At adoption, because I think this is the time to thank staff for the work that they've done to get it this far. I know the residents of this water system are very thankful to the work that's been done here and to move it forward. So this actually started last term for me, which is only like a year ago. So which indicates the speed that things can get done. So thank you very much.
Just never forget that. That speed is anticipated and expected now. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finally, we have question period. We have 2 online for question period.
Thank you. We'll go online first, and then we'll call those in the House. Who's first online?
Linda Evans, if you could turn on your mic and camera.
Go ahead, Ms. Evans. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chair and Board Directors. So I have major concerns where I live, which is on Fairtide Road. And I would ask that CVRD install fire hydrants on Fairtide Road and Cove Road. Both roads are cul-de-sacs, and in the event of a fire, access to Shell Beach Road would be blocked. And also, I am asking that Area H pass a bylaw banning logging on private properties in Area H when logging on commercial properties is banned due to hot weather? Those are my two questions.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, I can't provide you an affirmative response to those in this meeting other than to refer that to the area director and to staff, because I'm not sure on the first one if there's a water system, although no, there's probably not adequate fire flows as far as regulations to go with fire hydrants. So it will require major improvements to the water system. On the efficacy or the legality of banning wood cutting or logging on private property in conjunction, we would have to refer that to staff to see what is legal and possible. But I will take your questions here and try and report back, if not at the next board meeting, directly to you as quickly as possible. And Director Martman has noted those questions, and we will follow up with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we do appreciate the letter that you sent in advance to help us wrap our brains around it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next one for online.
S. Robertson.
S. Robertson, if you unmute and or turn your your camera on, but we definitely need your microphone on to hear your question. Okay, well, we'll let you hang on the line. I'm going to go in-house, and then we'll try and come back to you if you're able to sort it out on your end there. We'll go into in-house questions for question period. Oh, Ms. Benson left? Oh, okay. This was the chance. Could have got me because I haven't read the paper yet.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Susan from Satlam. Susan Kaufman from Satlam. I appreciate your comments regarding number 14 from last week's ESC regarding Taylor Park, but I don't believe, my question is, why would we proceed before contacting the province, specifically Parks, about the First Nations agreement?
I'd have to, I don't quite understand the context, and it might take too long for you and I to hash it out, but I will follow up on the sort of necessity and appropriateness of that, both with our park staff and the area director, and get back to you and report out at the next board meeting. I don't have enough knowledge of the specific issue that you're referring to, and explaining to me here won't help me illuminate enough to answer your question, but I will follow up and report out at the next board meeting.
That's fair enough. It was included in the report. That's why I brought it to your attention. And I was remiss in, and it's pointless now, but I agreed with Mr. Evans about the adoption rather than the received, because to the mind of most people, adoption means something different than receiving. And just a case in point to support our firefighters who are going to be very tasked this year. When the Malahat Fire Service report came to light, it was not adopted and it was received. So I'm wondering the difference between what does adopt mean and what does receive?
Two very different. Adopting something to do with watermelons is different than adopting to something to do with strawberries. So the fire service review, from my understanding and my gleaning of it, definitely needs a lot more study and work on implementation. And when we're talking about the sort of visioning exercise and design standards and things like that for a parks piece, I don't want this to be interpreted the wrong way, take it as intended, has a different bar for implementation. My experience has been, and just, take it for what it is. Every parks master plan that I've ever been involved in, when we get into each implementation phase, there's a deep dive on the specifics for that implementation piece I don't believe this will be any different. I've heard from both staff, the director, and others that all of that is checked through that lens of safety and enjoyment of the community and all of those things. And there's also respect for, in every community, you might have 80% support for a specific amenity, but 20% of people definitely disagree with it. That doesn't mean it would be the right thing to do to not move forward. So my experience has been that when we're looking at adopting standards or a plan, there's ground truthing that needs to go on throughout the implementation process and the build-out process, and those things do come out in the wash. So that's the best answer I can give you. If you have more specifics, I can look at specific points within the plan. I'll be honest, as the chair, I have a big volume of stuff, and I do sort of skim those bigger reports. So I'd have to get back to you on any more detail.
Thank you for that. And, you know, you're obviously much more knowledgeable than I am as a member of the public.
I don't know about that, Ms. Kaufman.
But I do think that there was certainly concern raised by Chief Schutz.
Yes, and we're absolutely engaging and working through those issues. And like I said, and I've repeated it a number of times, safety comes first.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to memorially name, I'm going to put a name on the podium that says Mr. Evans, the honorary podium. Mr. Evans, welcome.
Thank you very much. Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. Mr. Chair, on 14.1, can you explain to the public of Shawnigan, is on 14.1, is the pavilion going to be pulled out of there now?
Not for sure. It's being reviewed as per number 3. Is the pavilion being pulled out of it? It's been slated for further review as per number 3 of that resolution that was added by the director.
So it's just going to be reviewed?
Well, it's going to be looked at in more detail to ensure that any of the concerns are addressed. If it's not suitable, it would likely be removed. But we're predicting the future. I'm not skilled enough to do that in Sault Ste.
So when 14.1 is adopted, does that mean that all those strategic plans, like putting in the rail and trail to Mill Park, does that mean that you are giving the funding to, or giving the...
I think I gave a pretty clear explanation to that in the as clear as I can, a detailed explanation. These plans are adopted, they're moved forward. Each phase of the implementation is ground truthed and tested. If it meets the test, it moves forward. If not, it can be amended or changed, but the principles are adopted.
And so everything that's written on those schematics that were attached to 14.1, and there must be like 200 pages altogether. Is that all going to be, does that mean to say that that's all going to be considered now?
I believe so, yes. And as I had mentioned, I think, and this is what I was trying to say, and I know that we seem to be playing political games, but the point being is we have a parks master plan. North Cowichan has big plans for different things, arts and heritage hubs, millions of dollars of infrastructure. Those are visions that are adopted, but at each stage of implementation, they're ground truthed and tested for affordability and effectiveness and more engagement with the community. So, I could refer and have a further conversation with Director Acton and staff, but my experience has been when you take a big plan and adopt it at each phase of implementation, it is ground truthed and tested and see if it meets those means tests to deliver on the outcomes.
So
But the vision generally is sort of adopted, yes.
So if there's 200 pages...
So, Mr. Evans, we're getting into a debate. I've answered the question, I think, at this point. Do you have any other questions for me today before we adjourn?
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I always appreciate your tenacity. Any further questions for question period? Any other items on the agenda, Ms. Ferguson? I think we can go to a motion to go into closed session.
Motion.
Oh, Director not Director, now you're part of the team. The Robertson, I think I see your microphone unmuted. Would you like to ask a
Yes.
question?
I do, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place to ask it.
Yeah, just
I have a
name and
question
address
about-
first for the record, and then go ahead.
Sorry. Susan Robertson. I live on Fairtide Road. I think it's in section H of CVRD. And I have concerns about the garbage pickup or lack thereof. We were asked about 7 years ago what we felt about garbage services. There was at that time a survey tucked under the lid of our bins. I'm sorry, Director Stone, you're laughing. I'm just concerned.
No, I was smiling because somebody's actually sounds like they want full garbage service, and that's really exciting to me. I also live in Area H.
Okay, here's my concern. I addressed this with CVRD. I wrote to the CVRD, waste department, and I've been talking to one of the ladies there, Leah, over email. And she explained the history of the last I believe it's 5 years at this point. I've lived here for a decade, and I do remember that survey that went out about 7 years ago. My recollection is that it was to be returned 7 days prior to its dispersal, which made it pointless for us to fill in. And at the time, we had a private garbage fella, sorry, I don't know his name, who would come every Wednesday and pick up our garbage for $5. He gave us a bunch of stickers. So we were being asked essentially to choose between an expensive CVRD proposal or $5 a week. So of course, most of us chose not to go with the CVRD proposal. This most recent period of consultation in this past month was advertised in the Cowichan Valley Citizen, I think. That's not distributed out here. It was posted in local hotspots, apparently. Nothing within a 25-minute drive of my house displayed anything about that. So literally, unless you were tripping through the CVRD website for some other reason, we had no idea you wanted to know about our opinions about garbage. And here's the thing, without providing any kind of garbage service out here, what you're forcing each of us to do, I did the math, for an average family car, you're asking us to drive out to Peerless once a week with our waste, which is actually 575 kilograms of CO2 production per household out here. There's about my neighbor counted 116 homes. And with the secondary residences that we have seen in the last 5 years, there are probably 150 households out here. We have no garbage service. We have no fire service. We can't even get a paved road with a line down the middle of it. I can't imagine a circumstance where you would approve the construction of a subdivision of 150 homes without infrastructure for garbage and fire. And yet here we sit 10 years after I moved here, and nothing has happened. Some of my friends and neighbors burn their garbage, so we turn it into particulate matter. Some of my neighbors tip their garbage into the ocean, their food waste certainly, and the rest of us drive it out to the Peerless dump at the cost of almost 600 kilograms of
Ms.
CO2.
Robertson? Sorry, if you were in-house, I would have asked you to ask your question. I think a lot of the things, maybe if you ask the question, will be answered when you get the answer. But I definitely hear what you're saying. It's generally more of for conciseness of a question, but
Sure.
I think I get what you're getting at.
Well, my question, I guess, is at what point are you going to do something about this?
Well,
We have enough population to justify this, and we've been told it'll be at least another 2 years. Come on.
Unfortunately, I can tell you the procurement for the trucks alone is about 18 months out. Solid waste management plans are an adopted plan that goes through all kinds of provincial review. That has been adopted. 3-stream garbage collection for Area H has been adopted. What Director Martman has offered is if you want specific details on the implementation, he's happy to give you a call and go through those with you. But as a fellow Area H resident, I can tell you going back to prior to Director Martman's time, when the surveys were done, a lot of us were supportive of it, but it wasn't supported at the time. Since that time, the solid waste management plan, I think 3.0 is that what we're on? Has been approved by the province, and we've been working through implementation. COVID definitely put a bit of a timeline pushback on some of the procurement. But I know that I think, and I don't have the appropriate staff here, but I think the procurement process is underway. Three Stream is expected to start, unfortunately, sometime within the next couple of years. I'm looking for the, oh, there's, he's over there? Yeah, Mr. It was supposed to be sooner. Unfortunately, it got pushed back, but we are moving forward with that in Area H. And Director Martman will be happy to follow up with you by, yeah, but we don't put phone numbers on our public meetings.
I will contact Director Martman.
Yeah, and he can give you specifics on the rollout, but it is coming, and I do apologize.
Interim measure?
Sorry,
Have you
pardon
considered an
me?
interim measure such as distributing electric composters. That would get
Yeah.
rid of our food waste.
I've reviewed the electric
At a cost of about
composters.
$300 per
Ms.
household.
Robertson,
That's much
Ms.
cheaper.
Robertson, could you please stop talking over me? I was still trying to answer your question respectfully. You know, I appreciate the ideas that you brought forward. I think we received a letter highlighting it. I know we have looked into electric composters. They are quite expensive, actually, and their longevity is not assured. They're essentially expensive disposable appliances. But that being said, Director Martman is happy to follow up with you and give you specific details for all your questions.
Thank you. I'll contact him.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next up is closed session. We're closing today under sections 91A, C, E, F, G, and K.
Thank you. If I could get that motion. Moved by Director Segal, seconded by Director Morrison. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We'll take about 10 minutes. We'll be back at